Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host, and today, guys, we're going to be actually mixing things up a little bit. We're obviously going to talk about Revit automation and tackling engineering firm pain points head on. We're going to talk about what manual tasks are doing and slowing you down. I've got some Deloitte information that I pulled that is going to be pretty interesting to go through and talk with you guys, and that's like experience gaps, talent preparedness, AI transformation, and human/AI collaboration, how all that works, manager role reinvention and burnout, workforce capacity and performance management, employee value proposition in an AI era, like basically what does people mean to you, your organization, and everything, broader societal and economic pressures, like how that's going for folks, and then we're going to, again, experience gaps, talk about those for new hires, onboarding, training, that kind of fun stuff, and basically what AI's role is in all of this. Then we're going to how to leverage AI strategically. What are you doing about it? Reinvent your management and performance metrics, how to talk about that, how to lead people through it, foster your human potential in all of your teams, and then they say balance outcomes is like the last piece in this Deloitte structure and talking about it. So I'm excited to dive in to this report and basically what Deloitte's put out and some of their, Deloitte reports, right? These fancy people that aren't necessarily doing the work, but compiling research to talk about it. So in 2025, engineering firms face talent shortages and burnout rates at 46%. Now, this is per Jellyfish, which is talent management, engineering management. A lot of this is software related to, and basically they take the whole slice of engineering firms, which include MEP as well as software firms. So 46% is the burnout rate right across engineering firms, which is totally insane. And that's why automation, when you can cut 70% of or 50% of what you're doing, either your team's going to get burnout or you haven't implemented automation to where your team has stress relief around projects, around what they're doing. So a lot of them are just worked super hard to where they're just screw it, I'm out. And then you don't have a pipeline big enough to bring in, train, onboard new talent. So it's basically this diminishing pyramid where you've got a bucket of talent. And then as you go along, you spring some holes in your bucket, right? That's burnout, where people are leaving. They're just going away. But on the top end of that bucket, you don't have more people coming in than are leaving. So you end up with a diminishing workforce that is trying to get more done in less time, which then just increases the burnout that you experience in your firm. So those holes continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger without you actually patching the hole, right? You're not the stick it man, that's got the whatever that tape is, right? That just slaps on the side of a bucket to fill the holes. There's none of that going on to create solutions to keep all the water and people in your bucket. So automation is ultimately inevitable. And so when we talk about all of this and everything that we're getting into and workforce issues and going through the rest of this, automation's inevitable. And a lot of this, and in talking to people, you're rejecting it just like people that saw the car rejected it. And it's not to do with price point or anything like that. This is after roads have been built and you're still riding a horse around or walking, right? That's the type of level of rejection that we're starting to see is nah, my horse is good. I like my horse, gonna continue to ride my horse, screw your cars and roads and all that kind of stuff. I'm just gonna keep riding my horse, and we're gonna do that across the country. You're just not gonna get very far. That's really what we're talking about here as we talk about, workforce issues, workforce enhancements, and how people are really addressing this moving forward. So let's go back and we'll start at talent acquisition and retention. So when I look through Deloitte's reports and their findings is like turnover costs basically amount to $50,000 per engineer as per industry select, right? So like you're losing effectively 50 grand for every engineer that leaves out of your firms. That's in recruiting fees, that's in onboarding and training, that's in, moving stipends and moving costs that you're going to have to pay people. So you've basically got a $50,000 turnover cost that you got to recoup or ultimately try to not spend, right? So the more people that you can retain, the better off that you're going to do. And some of this is like straight out of pocket costs, right? You're paying recruiters 25, 30 grand to find engineers. A lot of it's onboarding and training costs. So basically lack of productivity for the first, call it 2 months of them being there. It's another 20 grand. So at the end of the day, like what this amounts to is, again, you're just walking everywhere. You're not using a car. You're not onboarding and training your talent correctly or well so that they're not getting up to speed efficiently. And then you're not ultimately retaining them, right? So they're not happy with what's going on. They leave and you got to find new guys to fill the holes. So as we look at this, right, burnout and tech churn, 46% expect rising burnout. So we're already at 46% of burnout rate. And then of that 46%, like another 46% or 46% of those people expect it to rise. So the burnout rate's about half, and half of those firms are expecting a rising burnout rate, which just goes through the whole thing that I explained, is that you've not filled any holes in your bucket. So you have a diminishing workforce. That diminishing workforce needs to take on more. And because you have no automation or AI, they're going to burn out at a faster rate, which is what you're seeing. And so more people are going to leave. So pretty soon what this amounts to is like you only have the crappiest talent left. Like all your good people are out the door. They're going to greener pastures because they're going to be the ones that can go and get a job easier than everybody else. And so you're just left with the schmucks that you don't want to work with, like at the end of the day. So again, just a hard point to be in. And so a lot of this is in your scaling and overcoming these like bottlenecks is not only implementing automation and like you as a firm leader have to figure out how to implement this, how to implement training, and like doing all your normal work. So you're basically going to have to work double time to train everybody, to onboard people, to do the work, right? So you're doing the work of the future and the work of today so that you can survive, right? Like that's what this is coming down to. Because if you don't figure out how to train people, then you're never going to be able to build a team. If you don't do the work of today, then you're not going to survive till tomorrow because your cash flow goes to nothing. So you got to do the work of today because you don't have the people to do the work of today, or they're not good enough to do the work of today. And so you've got to basically work double time to get through all of this. So as you start to implement like automation, you're improving your productivity. That allows you to, for the work of today, to cut that down from, let's say, 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week, and then backfill the rest of that with training, marketing, with other tasks that you're able to do to look basically out to the future. So when we look through the 2025 Global Human Capital Trends Report, which is a survey of 13,000 businesses and HR leaders across the world, frames workforce challenges as a series of tensions in a boundaryless world, right? So we're dealing with guys that have offshore labor, that are hiring people, let's say all your work is here in the States and you're hiring people in India, the Philippines, Germany, or Poland, or Brazil, whatever, Mexico, to help you do work. So a lot of firms do that, some of the big firms, end up having those people. I've never heard like a great story out of those firms in that workforce doing stuff for them. Now, maybe for their local projects in, global firm, their local stuff in India, they've got local talent doing it. That I think seems to work out pretty well. But when you cross codes and cross countries and how things are done, it's like doing a project in Chicago, right? Doing a project in California is not the same as doing a project in Chicago. There's just too many different rules, regulations, everything else for those projects. And a lot of things get lost in translation. So, even though it is boundaryless, like there's still a lot of other items that kind of come into play there. But when you start to use AI and that person is now automating the placement of all these devices across an entire model, they're in control of what gets placed, how it gets placed, what's going on. And then they know the codes for that specific locale, so they can make those changes to the model and do that pretty effectively. So that's ultimately what we're looking at when we talk about using AI and automation. It's for a person that knows the codes, knows the layouts, and they're just speeding up their own workflows instead of, in the old days where a guy, made red lines on a drawing, handed it to the next in line, right? Architect, project architect. Then you had, the grunt guys, in drafting rooms doing all this stuff. So you had basically one big architect that had designs, and then that work would get handed off to the next guy down the line to actually like implement and bring that to life. That's basically what's happening now with automation, is that same person says, I want this. They punch it in to the software and boom, like all that's created. Now they can really ultimately just manipulate what's in the model, right? So let's say that using Kowabunga Studios and our software, you put in 2 receptacles per wall. Well, on one wall, you need 3. Okay, great. You just add in another outlet for that room, done. And a lot of this kind of goes in that same scenario where you're going to use automation to do the first like big bulk of layout and placement, and then you come through, fine tune it, go through all the owner requirements, what they want out of the project, and then that allows you to, again, do your refinements, do your placement, and not all of it's manual. So you're saving a ton of time as you go through this, but ultimately you have final say on what goes on the drawings, bringing in the owner's piece of it. So that's really, I think, where a lot of this from AI and globalization comes in, is there's a lot of like trust problems that have occurred over the years for hiring, offshore people to do anything. And so this creates a kind of discrepancy between, what you want people to do and then what they're doing. Now, the only probably exception to that is like if you brought them up in the industry to where you trained them to do things your way and you trained them from the start. So you took a blank slate of a new, let's say, college graduate in India, the Philippines, whatever, Mexico, doesn't matter, some other country, and taught them U.S. standards. Well, they're just like any other person, right? You teach them the way that you want things done. A fresh college graduate out of the States versus fresh college graduate there. Now you can argue about the quality of education across that, but outside of that, like you're still going to teach them how you want things done. And so they're a blank slate from like that standpoint, and again, on the electrical side, like electricity is electricity the world over. Our units are all the same, so that helps a ton. Now for mechanical architecture with like metric to imperial conversions, right? That's a whole different ball game. But for like electrical stuff where, an amp is an amp the world around, that helps out a ton in how we go about doing drawings. So that's the electrical perspective. But for the rest of you guys, yeah, I don't know how that translates in the metric to imperial conversions. That's a whole different deal. So, but as we look at, people, right, and short-term business results, like you got some help, you got some things done, but are they going to be long-term fits for you and your firm? And this is where like experience gaps, manager overload, AI, and those kind of boundaries between everything is really what can differentiate your firm. So one is in like answering the phone, responding to emails, everything else that kind of comes up in a project and how you like work. But really where the rest of this comes into is like employee retention, right? Which we talked about at the top of this is, can you retain your people? So wherever they are around the world, that is not so much the thing. It's, can you garner trust with your internal people as well as with your clients, right? So if your clients at the end of the day love how you work, what you work, what you do, your results, that's ultimately what you're trying to garner, is trust with your clients. And so when we go into people here, right, for workforce trends, experience gaps, all that kind of stuff, like, so 2/3 of managers and executives report that recent hires are not fully prepared for their roles, with lack of hands-on experience being the top issue, which is exacerbated by AI automating routine tasks, which shrink entry-level opportunities and make it harder for workers to build practical skills. Nearly 3/4 of executives agree that organizations must do more to connect employees with experience building opportunities. Tension lies between the demand for experienced talent and the diminishing pathways to gain that experience, potentially widening skills shortages. So I've talked about this a ton on the podcast, where basically a firm wants a fully trained, like don't have to do nothing person come on and they just set them free, right? Well, that's not how it works out here in the real world. So this, like, they don't have any skills. How do I train them? Well, like, you have to train them. You have to build a training curriculum to teach them to do the things that you want them to do. And so whether you're union, ABC, non-union, you're an engineering firm, whatever, like, you got to put them to work. You have to have the training pipeline. Like, yes, there's all these organizations that are like training augmentation organizations. But at the end of the day, they do not care as much as you care about how well that person works, right? If you train them, you're going to have a higher level of care training them to do work than any other training organization, because the training organization, like, they just need to get people through and past them. They don't care about how well they perform, showing up on time, teaching all these life skills. That is not their mandate. So for all of us, the more that you can put into a training curriculum, have a trainer, have somebody dedicated to that, the better off you're going to be in not only like hiring people, but retaining them. Like, you're going to garner loyalty because you taught them how to do things. Like, that is how this works. So the more that you're able to put into it, and the fact that like 2/3 of managers report that nobody's fully prepared, like, no shit, man. Like, what do you think is happening out there? You're getting folks either off the street or they're coming from a different organizations that do things differently. Like, things are going to be different. So yeah, like, and if you're hiring young people to come into the job because you fired all the old guys because you didn't like how much you were paying them, for half the wage, like, you're making up that difference. So let's think about this. So you fire all the old guys. Let's say the old guys, for round numbers, are making $100,000. The new person coming in, again, round numbers, this is not reality, but like, they're making $50,000. Well, you now have a $50,000 gap in experience, right? What that young person, what that old guy can do, he can probably do in 25% of the time as the young person. So now you're paying somebody basically 4 times as much to do the same level of work because you hired the old guy with experience, or you fired them and hired a young person with no experience. So, and that 4X is also, you're going to have somebody to train them. So you then have to take away, 25, 30% of the experienced person's time to teach the young person how to do what they do. So you got to weight up their salary that much, and it'll probably take them, again, 2, 3, 4 times as long. So you are actually paying more for the young and experienced person than the old experienced person, right? Like, that is how this works. But math is hard. And so you just see a straight up salary, not, again, this is short versus long-term consequences. If you fire all the people with all the experience, you're going to have a short-term cash flow increase. But long-term, you're going to have a poorer quality of work. You're going to have a lot of rework. You're going to have a lot of other issues, down the line for all of your projects. So as we go through this, just note that you do need both, right? The old guys are going to retire soon. Your young guys are coming in and going to have a career. So you're going to have some weighted down salaries for the young people to learn what it is that you want them to do, as well as all the heaviness of the old guys, right? Because they're skilled, experienced, so on and so forth. So this doesn't shock me. It also doesn't shock me because nobody wants to train anybody. They don't want to spend the time one-on-one to hey, here's how you do something, and train them so that they can ultimately go on and do it themselves. Training is the foundation of everything. And if you're not training people, if you don't have anybody that you're mentoring or bringing up, what are you doing, man? We got to have that. And so this is where AI has basically come in. We're trying to solve a human problem with technology, right? Because nobody has trained anybody, because no one has brought people into the industry. They haven't recruited anybody. Now we've had to build technology to fix the production gap, basically, right? Not productivity, but the output of the industry is been growing steadily, and we haven't backfilled enough people to put into it. So you've had to fill it with technology. That is the only way we've gotten anything done, because we couldn't onboard and train enough people fast enough because nobody wanted to onboard and train anybody. So you have this massive gap between output of what's required by the industry, projects, taken on, and then the number of people there to do it. So when we look at this next piece of AI transformation, human AI collaboration that Deloitte put together, is over 54% of leaders express concern about the blurring distinctions between human and technology-driven work. Only 6% of workers feel their organization is making great progress in realizing AI's value. So right here, we have a huge problem in people wanting to adopt AI. That's number one, or automation technology in general. However, 52% of leaders see deeper human AI collaboration as very or critically important. AI is repositioning roles, shifting from creation to review and refinement, which is what I've been saying for the last 10 years on all this stuff, while also threatening job security for some. As noted in related Deloitte Insights, where 28% worry about technology displacing jobs. The report positions AI as a tool for augmentation rather than replacement, but warns that without trust-building measures, it could erode workforce morale. What this tells me is the bottom 28% of you suck at your jobs, right? You are just bad at what you do and should not be in the workforce, because what this is effectively getting at is if you're good, if you shift from creation to review and refinement, basically all the people that are not value adding in their jobs, right? You're not helping to, in the engineering world, you're just a monkey pressing some buttons, putting devices in the model. That is effectively what you're doing. If you're that, you're not adding actual value to the project. You're not thinking about the one line, about code items. You're not being able to effectively think creatively about it. That is a problem, right? Design new systems, design layouts. So if somebody's telling you exactly what to do, you do not add value to the project. But if you're the person that is hey, we need to have one receptacle per wall in every single office. We want aux sensors in every office. And in those offices, because these are nice, fancy people, we also want dimmer control for them to have individual control in their offices, not just on off, but actually dimming their lights. And you're the one creating all those tables, figuring out what those control sequences look like. They're more advanced. And designing out those systems, right? Figuring all the specific notes that we have to add to the drawings to tell people what to do in the field. those things, that is a value add to the project. That is like, you're not just a monkey over there clicking buttons. So, and that is 28% worry about technology displacing jobs. That is those people, right? And so what you're seeing in a lot of these firms is the person just inputting stuff or doing research or filling out forms because they had to, right? Basically, a lot of admins that added no value other than like this paperwork had to be done. Those people are worried about their jobs as they should be, right? It's basically like all the typists. Like you don't see floors and floors of typists that were in the 1920s banging away on typewriters, right? Like there's pictures of all that, just like you don't see floors of just drafting personnel, like doing floor plans and insulation and all this stuff, right? That's been replaced by the computer, by even AutoCAD was a big leap up. Revit was another big leap up. So over time, over the last 100 years, you've seen this huge transition in what people are doing, right? Like the word processor is huge. And now you have like speech to text automation to where somebody can just, like me doing this podcast, will automatically have it transcribed. So you don't need a typist to take dictation and transcribe all your notes. Like that was a huge industry. I mean, there were probably hundreds of thousands of people just as typists. Like we don't need that anymore. And so this is what's happening here, right? In construction, in design and engineering, more so on the design side, you know, on our side of the fence, like we don't need people just clicking buttons. We need people that actually think through a project, think through design, like have real ideas, know what this stuff is, and can press the buttons themselves now to automate all of that effectively. So when I see this, right, and only 6% of adoption, it's that when half the leaders believe that the firm needs it, but only 6% are actively adopting it, you have a huge gap here where leaders know that they need it. They need it for margin. They need it for competitiveness. They need it to basically survive in this next wave. Otherwise, they're going to have competitors that come in, undercut them on price and everything else, and then take all of their business because they can do it with less overhead, take all that business, and like all of you will just not have a job. Right? That's what we're going towards. But if we have adoption where you're going to cut some fat off out of your firm, people that don't contribute are just bitching and complaining anyway, right? They're poor personalities. They're not fun to be around. Like those people are going to go. The firm will be leaner. It'll be better to work for. Everybody's going to be happier at work, right? Like you keep all of those people. You keep the people that value add, that are great with clients. All that is going to be so much better for you and your firm. But that gap of most leaders, right, the majority see that it needs to be implemented, but only 6% are implementing it, right? So you have 94% of people who are either going to get on board or they're going to get out. Like that is what we're talking about for these firms and adoption. So when we go down to like manager role, reinvention, and burnout, nearly 3/4 of organizations recognize the need to redefine manager's role amid rapid change, but only 7% are making significant progress. So again, we have a huge gap here between like 73% realize they need to change like how managers do stuff, and only 7% are doing it. So like we have an implementation gap. Like I know I need to train people, but I don't want to, so we don't, right? Like that ends up in a very bad place. And so you have this huge gap in most firms where I know I need to do it, but screw it, I'm not going to. Like you see the pattern here of like, if you just implement stuff, if you just do things, you're going to be way better off. So managers spend nearly 40% of their time on admin and problem solving tasks, leaving just 13% for people development. Well, if you automated your admin task for 40% of your time, you would be able to do more than 13%. So if you spent, say, 20% on admin time on, whatever this means by problem solving tasks, right? Like Sally's sick or something like that, okay, that's still going to be in that 20%. That's a human to human thing. Now, a lot of this is on probably paperwork, approvals, whatever. And so if you can drop that in half, now you go from 13% of people development to like 26% people development. And then if you also recorded everything you did in your people development to then use for training for future people development, well, that would also like heavily speed up your people development time, because now everything's recorded. You don't have to repeat yourself. And then for any future pieces that you need to refine or edit, you can spend the time to do that. So number one is like figure out a way to automate some of your admin stuff. 2 is record everything that you're doing in people development so you don't have to repeat yourself for doing it, and it becomes better over time. And then here's the next one. Over a third, 36%, feel unprepared for people management. So, and 40% report declining mental health after becoming managers. God, you bunch of soft people. So what this tells me is we're dealing with the Peter principle, right? So what that means is you've been promoted to your level of incompetence. So we got 36% of people out here that get promoted that were not prepared to be managers, meaning you didn't do the necessary things for it, but you're like a senior engineer. And so the only place for you to go is department head, but you really don't want to deal with people. You don't like people. You don't like talking to them. You don't like solving any of their problems. You don't like dealing with their issues. So you don't do it. And then you're like, why do I have to deal with like Sally's family problems? Or, you know, Paul over here just like is trying to go to his kid's soccer game, but we got projects to go out. Like, how do I manage this, man? And it's like, and then you have this burden of a whole bunch of unmade decisions around what you do with Sally and Paul. Like, or you got, you know, another group over there, like Susie and Mike are, you know, having relations after work in the break room. Like, what do you do with them? Now, all these people problems, right? So one, you got promoted to a position that is management and is all about people, and you don't like people. So you're like, I hate this job. And then this is why a fourth of you or 40% like hate your job. It's like, no shit, man. You got to deal with people. So I think a lot of this goes down to like, we're not promoting the right people. We're not giving raises. If you just got a raise as a senior engineer, right, an extra $5,000 a year or something, instead of going over and being a manager, you'd be a lot happier staying as a senior engineer, like just doing your job, dealing with clients and not dealing with any like internal people issues. Like, I just have to solve my technical problems. I do my work. I do my projects. Life's good, right? So this is for senior leadership and who's promoting people into these positions. You also have to very much know your people, right? Is this guy going to be good at managing people, solving problems, dealing with people, and like people? I mean, this is all you got to deal with is like, who's doing what? How good are they at what? Who do I assign to which project? Are these guys better or worse with specific clients? Like, what do we know about them? And so that is what management is all about. And yeah, you probably should need some classes for this, but a lot of it is like just straight up soft skills of like, do you like being around people? Number one. If you do, we can deal with all like the management things of like how to solve certain issues, how to deal with certain problems, how to like manage all the soft skill things, right? Like, Tom sucks at his job. How do we fire him, right? Like, what do we do? So all of those things are very teachable and coachable skills through like dealing with certain issues, how to approach it. You know, do we put them on a work improvement plan, right? Like all these things, those are coachable. If you like people, you have to like care. And if you don't care about people, then don't go into management. That's like the simplest thing here. So yeah, and then it's like all these people are going to burn out. Well, no shit. Again, if you hate people, you're going to hate your job and want to quit. All right, we solved that issue. Like people if you're going to be a manager. If not, just ask for a raise and stay in your, you know, job, right, as a whatever you are. So don't become management if you don't like people. All right, workforce capacity performance management. All right. Unlocking capacity through better ways of working. Again, if you're not using AI automation, you're just going to keep having problems. And this is like excessive meetings. So if you also are terrible at your job, you don't get to the point. So here's the big one on this. If you're a manager or somebody leading a meeting, having an agenda will solve like most of these issues, right? Have an agenda, be clear about the results that you want to get out of the meeting, have an actionable thing from the meeting, and be able to move forward effectively out of that. Like, here are the key takeaways, who's going to do what, and we move forward from there. So if you're able to do that, then meetings become pretty easy. This low value work, again, if you're filling out a form, typing something in that like AI can automate, or like scheduling stuff, whatever, like a meetings link is huge, or having probably one common person to like help with scheduling everybody's calendar, an executive assistant, if you want the human touch of like figuring out meeting times or whatever, versus going through a project manager. If you had like a common scheduler to do that, meeting links can solve a lot of this, but there are some things that are like, you just want to be more personable around it and not be like, hey, go look at my meeting calendar, or you forgot to like block some stuff out in your calendar. And so having a human to like figure some of that stuff out would also be super helpful. So again, there's ways to like reduce burdens of having one person to like commonly schedule everybody. Huge thing for stuff like that. And then it's like, do you have an actual system and process to do things, right? Like, how do you run meetings? How do you show up to stuff? So like one of the things that Bezos has at Amazon is for every meeting across, I believe they do this for the entire company. I know they do it at the executive level, but whoever like called the meeting, basically they create a memo. I think it has to be 2 pages or 5 pages, I think is max. So 5 pages max on whatever they're going to be meeting on, a big synopsis of what the things are, the key points, the key data, the key whatevers of what that meeting is going to be on. Then they spend the first 30 minutes of that meeting handing out a piece of paper to everybody in the meeting with all 5 pages, and everybody sits quietly for the first 30 minutes and reads. Because we know that there's always going to be some executive or some person who didn't get around to actually reading it. So now nobody has to do homework. They just show up, read it, and then they can discuss it all, versus somebody basically lying through the meeting to say, yeah, oh yeah, I read that. No idea what anybody's talking about, right? So we avoid lying, and everybody just can show up, read the thing. But this also, there's a lot of homework, right? A 5-page report to go into that meeting. So somebody has done a lot of work like to get there, then everybody has an easy time for the rest of it. So again, if you're going to be a manager managing people, you have to do a lot more upfront work to make that meeting super effective, right? So an hour of your time, and you, let's say, have 6 people on your team. So if you wasted an hour in the meeting for everybody, that's now 6 hours of wasted time versus 1 hour of your time up front to save, 5 hours collectively. So the manager needs to do more upfront work to ultimately save the team from their pieces. So this also has like fewer people entering the job market, like high school graduates peaking in 2025 before declining. So this thing I think is just absolute garbage. Most people aren't graduating from high school because either they're like made it on YouTube, they've started another business, they realize that high school is garbage and they don't really need it for anything. They need skills. They don't need a diploma, because a diploma doesn't say that you have skills. Skills and output say that you have skills, not a piece of paper saying that you passed some tests, right? That is not a skill. That's saying that you could regurgitate history and, get past English, right? It's not saying that you're actually good at anything. So that I think is crap. And then it's like intensifying labor shortages in sectors like manufacturing. So some of this is like the hiring practices of manufacturers saying that you need a high school diploma. Like, why? To say that you can show up on time. But even that, like, there's people that pass high school and didn't show up on time. So again, a lot of like what's in the world versus like how culture is. The workforce and people trying to hire people haven't adopted to like the culture of and what people realize in the education system, because culture moves like so much faster than industry. And so industry's got to catch up. And this is why you see like those 6-7% adopters, right? That's first front of the curve guys are going to really leap just huge bounds in front of everybody else because they've done this adoption. They've adopted to what culture is. And then they're hiring the best out of that group because they don't require something like a high school or college diploma, like that. It's pretty simple on that side of things. Now, and some of it, like for engineering, like we do need college diplomas for a chunk of our people. I need licensed engineers ultimately. And so I need you to pass some tests. Now, if you want your salary to be basically capped, unless you go and do business development, then by all means, right? But then you got to be a good people person. You got to know a ton of people. You got to be willing to go out there and, knock on doors. So totally different skill set, but sales can pay quite a bit, but you don't need diplomas for any of that. And then everything else that you don't need a diploma and degree on the engineering side, like, you're just going to cap out at some point for what we can ultimately pay you. That's just, you cap out on how much responsibility you actually take for a project when you don't have a stamp in your license. So employee value proposition. It says over 70% of managers and workers are more likely to join or stay with organizations where the employee value proposition supports thriving in an AI-driven world, including job transformation, career growth, and work-life balance. Nearly 3/4, 74%, prioritized human capabilities as critically important. The tension here is between technology's efficiency gains and ensuring workers feel valued beyond their output. So this is all about caring for your people, right? If you care for your people, if you train them, you support them, you make sure that if they want, go to all their kids' soccer games, right? Volleyball games, basketball, whatever. That's ultimately what it gets to. Like, output still has to be there. That's a given. And then on top of that is like, do you care about their growth? Are you training them? Are you supporting them? Are you making sure that they can do the things that you want them to do? Are you empowering them to get to the next level, to earn more money because they're more effective at their job? Like, all of those things matter tremendously when we talk about basically this piece in employee value proposition. So as we go through, like, you have to care about your people. Again, if you're a manager and you don't care about your people, that's a big problem. So care. And then broader societal and economic pressures. Deloitte notes inclusive growth needs such as revising gig economy regulations, which somewhat having to do with us, to address long-term unemployment and facilitate reskilling. Again, do you train your people? Do you have a training program, onboarding program for your people? And global disruptions like AI could displace 85 million jobs by 2025 while creating 97 million new ones. So if you read this right, that's a plus 12 million job swing. So AI will actually grow the needs of the economy by 12 million jobs. This is per World Economic Forum data cited in Deloitte. Skills shortages in emerging fields like AI and sustainability. Like, again, we need 500,000 more electricians and welders just in the military. You need another million skilled trades in the U.S. today. So, like, there's going to be needs for a lot more of this, right? It says here, like, India needs another 300,000 professionals in just the semiconductor industry, right, to build all these AI chips and everything else. So a lot of this goes to, like, dude, you have opportunity. You just have to be good at your job. Like, if you are a simple monkey pressing buttons, you're done. You can't just coast by anymore. Like, you have to be good at what you do. You have to use your brain, like, put your mind to it, know people, like, learn skills, and then you're going to be so much better off moving forward. But if you don't do any of that, like, you are going to be one of the ones cut, and you're going to be mad at AI for the rest of your life. So figure out how to learn some skills, grow, and you'll get better. Now, in summary, we talked about a ton of stuff, but the big recap here is, right, figure out how to learn more stuff. AI will teach you, like, just type into AI, like, teach me about topic, and then read it, learn it. Don't just like skim the summary. Like, actually invest some time into learning the thing that you're trying to do. You do that, you're on the right path. Then for all of you leaders and managers out there, like, actually put a training program together, actually record the things that you're doing to train your people. It'll make your whole training pipeline way better. It'll improve everything you're doing. And then for the things that you want to have a human touch for, put people in that position, right? Like, scheduling can really use a lot of human touch most of the time versus just those calendar links to do stuff. Finding ways to improve, like, the things that aren't scalable but mean a ton to clients, right? And sending gifts and, putting a lot of human touches to things are going to be so much better for you guys. And then lastly, you've got to implement AI automation into, like, your workflows, right? A lot of this and how I put this podcast together is going through, like, what's worked really well, compiling all that data, pulling it all together, putting it into, nice overviews for me, pulling data for it. And then I have bullet points to read from, and then my own experience and the human side of things on top of it, so that the podcast becomes better, right? Like, that's how this works. So hire and train, recruit, improve your people, upskill everybody, help them learn how to learn. And at the end of the day, use AI and automation to do it. And that's going to be this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.